is something that is very needed for service veterans to have these dogs, and we were more than happy to be part of the launch of the PTSD service dog program. I'd like to thank some people for coming. Karen Luttrell, our advisor, Flora Wynne Chartrand, our zone commander, who seems to have disappeared, but she'll be back. But I'd also like to introduce now our first Vice President from Ontario Command, Gary Pond, who will take care of introducing everyone else. And thank you so much.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much. First of all, I'd like to bring greetings from Ontario Command. Comrade Sharon, our president, really wanted to be here today. And I'm really glad she didn't get to come, because it means I got to come to replace her. And you'd much rather have me here than her anyway. I want to thank you from the branch. You've done a fantastic job of hosting us here today. Catherine and Mary, I can't thank you enough. You've done everything to make sure we had accommodations, and it was fantastic for the 2 nights we were here in Sudbury. Wonderful, and thank you again so much. So Royal Canadian Legion Ontario Command is thrilled to now finally have a program called Operation Service Dog that helps us pair veterans with service dogs, veterans who need help, with psychiatric service dogs. And we are really thrilled to be in a partnership with Wounded Warriors Canada and with Pause for Thought, Medrick, the dog father, and as many other people we can get into our program to help us to do that. This is something new for the Royal Canadian Legion. We're not too good with collaborating with other organizations. However, it's something that I am certainly going to promote in my stay with the Legion. And the more we can do more, if we have help, we can do a lot more with more people and more organizations than we can alone. So it's something I really want to promote. I've known Medrick for 5 years now. I think next week it'll be 5 years, Medrick. And Medrick had a little bit of a stroll across Nova Scotia, New Brunswick, and Quebec and Ontario a few years ago to help bring awareness of our need for service dogs and pairing them with veterans. It went really well. I met Medrick in Eastern Ontario. I'm from the Ottawa area, and I tried to help as much as I can to get Medrick promoted. Medrick built a lot of bridges in those days, and we did some really good work. And right now, this is the culmination of it, is that the Royal Canadian Legion Ontario is finally going to start helping big time. I'd like to introduce Medrick, and I'm going to read this a little bit because I don't want to screw it up, because Medrick is an RMC graduate, and if I screw it up as a senior NCO, ex-senior NCO, I'll never hear the end of it, so I got to read this. Coos graduated from RMC in 1983, and he completed his wings training as an air navigator in October 1984 in Winnipeg. He was posted to 443 Squadron as a tactical coordinator. He was awarded the Star of Courage for his role in the dramatic air sea rescue in October of 1986. This event led to 30 years of a battle with the demons of PTSD. In 2012, Coos was paired with Ty, his service dog, and subsequently Ty, Coos, and his wife Jocelyn co-founded Pause for Thought. And they had paired to date 107 veterans with service dogs. Veterans and first responders. Coos' book, Further Than Yesterday, That's All It Counts, and I'm sure he has a copy of it here that you can see, recounts his struggles with beasts known as PTSD. Last year, Coos and Jocelyn were invested as Knight and Dame in the Order of St. George. Here from Nova Scotia to share his story of hope, please help me welcome my friend Coos Cousineau.
I'll leave her. Happy. Thank you, Gary. Ladies and gentlemen, thank you for having me here. It's wonderful. As we go through this story, you're going to understand that it's in lesion branches like this that this grassroots movement that has become what you're to hear about actually started. So I'm going to start with a couple of little lighter notes. For those of you who don't know the difference between a Canadian fairy tale and a Newfoundland fairy tale, we're about to tell you the difference. A Canadian fairy tale starts with Once Upon a Time. A Newfoundland fairy tale starts with By the Lord Thunder and Jesus, you ain't never going to believe this crap. And unfortunately, I would love to tell you that this is a Newfoundland fairy tale, but it's actually a true story. And the other thing, just because we're going to talk about dogs, I'm going to tell you real quickly how you can prove that your dog is your best friend. And how you do that is you conduct a small experiment. You open the trunk of your car and you put your significant other and your dog in the trunk. You leave them there for 15 minutes, you come back and open the trunk. I can guarantee you one of them is going to be happy to see you. And you know which one. And might I suggest you take the tire iron out of the car before you conduct the experiment, because you're about to get a beating. So let's put this into perspective. I woke up the morning of the 6th of October 1986 and I had the world by the arse. I graduated from RMC. I was living an adrenaline junkie's dream. I was on the fast track. My career was wonderful. I'd married my bride 286 days earlier. And we're 200 miles off the coast of Newfoundland conducting a Canadian fisheries patrol in defense of our fish stocks. And then a mayday call came in from an American longliner 500 miles off the coast of Newfoundland. And there had been a serious accident on board. 2 of the 5 crew members had been very seriously injured. And we were the closest unit, and we were dispatched to go effect that search and rescue. And as a backseater on a Sea King helicopter, I volunteered to be lowered down to this vessel. Now, to put this into perspective, the seas and swells were 30 to 35 feet high that night. There was a 68-foot boat with 55-foot whip antennas. We in a Sea King hover at 40 feet, and we got a 68-foot rotor arc. So to put us over top of the ship, we couldn't see the little vessel we were trying to hover over in the dark at night in a raging gale with 35-foot seas and everything going like this. So, should you ever find yourself in a position where you're throwing 35 feet through the air and you land at the base of a wall of water that's 35 feet high, 2 things are about to happen. The first is you're going to have an instant realization how big the universe is and how very, 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 very small you are. And the second thing you're going to instantly know is adrenaline is brown. Trust me. And the physics that threw me out like this went like that, and I come skipping across the top of the water like Bugs Bunny in that cartoon, and I smucked into the back of the ship, and I hit so hard that my entire side of my body went numb. And this will be important a little bit later. About 2 seconds later, I'm up in the rigging of this ship trying not to get, I'm doing sort of like epileptic seizure trying to keep my head out of the wires and stuff. I come swinging across the deck, got as close as we'd been that night, hit the quick release on my harness, free fall 14 feet down, hit the deck, and the oil from the bottom of my boots in the Sea King with the water on the boat, you can figure out what happens. I go sliding forward with all the water on the back of the ship, and I hit the wheelhouse of the ship. And for the first and only time that night, something good happened. And what it was, is I hit the same side of the ship with my body that I'd hit like 30 seconds ago. So it was already numb, so it didn't hurt. And that was the best thing that happened that night. And a whole lot of other stuff happened, and we're just going to skip that. And when the dust had settled and the smoke had cleared, I was awarded Canada's second highest award for bravery for what I had done out there that night. And the consolation prize was I developed PTSD. And in 1986, They didn't know how to spell it, let alone treat it. And for over 3 decades, I dealt with the ugliness that is PTSD. And for those of you who aren't aware, PTSD is one of the most complicated and complex mental health injuries that clinicians have to face. And the problem is I call it the smorgasbord of dysfunction. If we all went to a Chinese food buffet, and I'm sure they've got them here, and we each got a plate and we went up to the buffet, and I said, get lunch and come back, we could take a picture of every plate, and they'd look different. And if I even told you what to put on the plate, they'd still look different. And that is PTSD. And so you're dealing with depression, anxiety, suicidal ideation, anger, rage, agoraphobia, dissociative episodes, and a whole raft of different addictions. And that's the kind of stuff that PTSD is. And from a clinician's point of view, they're playing whack-a-mole. They're trying to deal with your depression and your anxiety and your addictions. And then to make it worse, you go back to the buffet, get a second helping, come back with stuff different than you had the first time. And that is what makes PTSD so hard. And the other side of it is there's 168 hours in a week. And if you're really, really, really lucky, you get to spend one of them with a mental health professional. And when you're struggling, those other 167 hours are long and lonely and scary. And not only does it affect you, but it affects your entire family. Everybody gets it. Not PTSD, but they're dealing with problems because nobody can splash around in a cesspool without somebody else getting splattered. And who's going to get splattered? People closest to the cesspool. So your families are wearing it. So marriages break down, dysfunctional relationships within families, maybe some more addictions issues. It's just not pretty. And I had gone through all of it. And through a long series of circumstances, I found out in 2012 that a dog like Ty could possibly provide some relief for somebody like me. And I was accepted into the program and I was going to get my dog, but I had a problem. I had been living in what we call the woodshed. It was a 10 by 12 garden shed on the back of my property. It was wired for electricity, it wasn't insulated. I would get up every morning, I would go out there and I'd spend all day there and I'd come back in the evening and I'd go to sleep. And I'd do that. So as you can tell, being that kind of a productive member of society, I couldn't have afforded my dog even if I could get one. And somebody said, well, you're a Legion member, or you're not a Legion member, you're a veteran, reach out to the Legion. I said, well, I'm not a Legion member. And they said, it doesn't matter, Legion helps veterans. So I reached out to the Legion, and the Con branch in Nova Scotia and the Nova Scotia Provincial Command agreed and stepped up and helped me acquire my dog. And so on the 6th of August, 2012 is Gotcha Day. It's the day I got my dog. It's an anniversary we celebrate in my house now because it's extremely important. And my life changed. Within a few days, she was waking me up from night terrors. And about 2 weeks in, she actually was good enough. She was waking me up before they started. And my wife really liked this because if you've ever experienced a night terror, one of the things that you get is these horrible night sweats, drench the sheets. And for 2.5 decades, she had woken up with me, heart racing, in a panic mode, disoriented, sheets soaked, and this wasn't happening anymore. And a few months after that, my daughter had come home from university and she was completely gobsmacked with the change in her father. Because I'd gotten hurt before she was born and she'd never seen me. All she ever knew was the injured me. And she was really impressed with the changes. So a few weeks later, my wife and I were out walking on the golf course, taking a stroll with the dog, and the voices started. And I know what you're thinking. The guy with the serious mental health issues got voices. But they weren't those voices. These were the voices of, what about all the others? Because I knew I wasn't alone. I was not the only one that had lived through this horrible mess, and I was not the only one struggling. And I knew that there were other veterans that could use the kind of help I got, but they probably didn't know it existed, and they probably couldn't have afforded it even if they did. So we took this, got this little plan in our brain. I went on a walk. I walked 1,065 kilometers over 50 days in 50 towns and legions just like this with people just like you. And I told this story just like this. And we collected money and we bought dogs like those and paired them up with other disabled veterans. And instantly the program was a success. In fact, our own success was probably one of my biggest problems because our wait list exploded. The supply of dogs is very finite, and there were a lot of other challenges. But that really didn't stop us. We just kept pushing ahead. And the Nova Scotia Nunavut Command of the Legion took an absolute leadership role in this country, and they continued to support what we were doing. Now, Wounded Warriors Canada, about 3 years ago, reached out and we talked, and they agreed that they would make a contribution to our program, and they did. And in the following months, I sat down with the executive director and national program director and talked about the requirement for long-term planning. Dogs like these take 18 months to train. So when you take the breeding cycle of a dog, the training cycle, there's about a 2-year lead time. And I said to them, look, I need to be able to go to the school and tell them I got the money in my back pocket to buy more dogs like these. I don't need the money today, but I need the commitment of the money over the next 2 years. So we sat down and wrote a 3-year memorandum of understanding with Wounded Warriors Canada, the Pause for Thought program of the Nova Scotia Nunavut Command of the Legion. About a year into it, we ripped it up. And we didn't rip it up because it was not working. We ripped it up because it was working too well. And they came to me and they said, what you've been doing with Pause for Thought, we would like you to come advise us and do it through Wounded Warriors Canada and do multiple programs. So the negotiations happened, and I became in the Pause for Thought program. I have stepped away. My title now is Papa Dog Emeritus, which basically translates in Latin to man who argues with government. That's my role. And all the other stuff is handled by my wife and a support team, including membership, representation of the Nova Scotia Nunavut Command. And at the end of January, Wounded Warriors announced a $300,000 funding commitment. And it was like, whew, okay, good start. And about a week later, I get a call from a lady named Pam Sweeney, who is the executive director of Ontario Command. And Pam said to me, could you do the same thing for us? And I said I could, but I'm not real good at reinventing fire or the wheel. Why don't we arrange a partnership where we're going to do exactly what you want, except we're going to move that money into Wounded Warriors Canada, then we're going to bring it down the way we had it. So basically, we're not reinventing fire, but we have a system. And you don't have to have subject matter expertise, because Wounded Warriors has it, and Wounded Warriors didn't have subject matter expertise, but they went and got me. And I became affectionately known as the Dog Father. And I oversee 8, now soon to be 9 programs, providing dogs coast to coast. And we went into this relationship, and on the 26th of April, Ontario Command made history in that they partnered with Wounded Warriors Canada under Operation Service Dog and announced another $225,000 funding commitment that will remain for veterans here in Ontario. And we've been going through some parts, and yesterday in Manitoulin and today here are the first 2 fundraising launches. And I grew up in a small town, 1,200 people. Population time has not changed in 40 years. Some say the fact is the population sign doesn't change because every time a young lady gets pregnant, a man leaves town. I don't know. But there it is, 1,200 people. And I grew up in a small town like this. And the Legion Hall actually hosted the Lions Club. They were co-located. This was, 1,200 people. It doesn't take long to figure out that in a good year you can date all the pretty girls and fight all the tough guys, sometimes twice. I mean, it was just the way it was. But this smaller communities, not Toronto, not Ottawa, not Vancouver, not Calgary, not Edmonton. Small towns are the fabric of this country. And it was why when we talked about doing the launch, I wanted to come up to the north. My wife and I just spent a week in a little place called Ear Falls. Does anyone know where that is?
Falls.
No, Ear Falls.
Oh, Ear Falls.
Okay, I'll give you a quick way to get to Ear Falls. Dryden, Kenora, halfway in between, turn north. When you run at a road, you're in Red Lake, back up 30 miles, you're in Ear Falls. And surprisingly enough, my bride and I, we hadn't been married yet, one of our first vacations together were to visit my parents who lived up there. And we went back this year and did some more fishing and chilled out. But it's this small town. It is the north. It is the places in this country that a lot of times get overlooked. And I can't thank you enough for the work that you folks are doing to help support Operation Service Dog and then Wounded Warriors Canada, the Dog Father Pause for Thought. Because at the end of the day, these dogs make unbelievable changes in people's lives. And I'm not going to keep you all here all day, but I'm going to share with you two stories that are very interconnected and will highlight why we do this. And the first has to do with a young lady that I met just before I went off on my walk. She lives in our community, lives about 5 minutes from my house, and her husband physically lost part of his brain in Afghanistan. He had burning gas drop inside of his brain. And the subsequent injury left him with no emotional self-regulation and a lot of problems, including PTSD from watching his best buddy cook to death in the chair beside him when they were trapped. And he needed help. So it took 3.5 years for me to get him ready just to get a service dog. Because this isn't just here's your service dog on your way. It doesn't work like that. And they had 2 children, 7 and 2. And we're going to get back to them in a couple minutes. But this is a family who, after he got his service dog, they live in our community. People would come up to her and say, "You're married? We thought you were a single mom." And they had lived there for 6 years. That was the kind of horrible mess they were dealing with. And through a Wounded Warriors Tribute to Service event, I met another woman who asked me if I could help her husband. And I couldn't talk to her husband originally because he was locked in a hotel room and wouldn't come out. And her and I manipulated the situation that I got face to face with him. He met my dog and he decided, okay, we'll put in an application. I said, just do it. It's going to take a while anyway. At least we'll have the paperwork done. And for those of you who know me or will be following us on Facebook, I have an addiction that I have no intention of battling or ever quitting. I'm a fishing fanatic, and it's only an addiction if you try to quit, and I'm not quitting. So his wife saw all these fishing pictures and said, "Can you take Eric fishing?" And I said, well, I can't physically abduct him and take him fishing, but if he wants to come, I'll take him. So we got him to go away fishing with a group through Project Healing Waters. And I'm a little bit of a devious, diabolical SOB. I used Eric as a lab rat. I arranged to have him as my roommate. And the first night, 2 o'clock in the morning, my dog wakes me up. I look at the clock and it's not me, I'm good. And I look over and Eric's struggling. And my dog's looking at Eric, and I just said, go. And she bounced across the room and woke him up. And he couldn't believe what had just happened. And every single night that we were away, that cycle repeated itself. We come back from fishing, and a few months later, he gets paired up with his service dog, a German Shepherd named Taz. Beautiful animal. Wind the clock a few more months, and we're having another fishing trip. This time, we're roommates, not because I want him as a lab rat, but we both have service dogs, and when we go fishing, we can just leave the dogs in the air-conditioned room. They can chill, have a nice time out. We've got each other. We're going to do okay in the boat. Life is good. And here is the difference. This second trip, not once did Ty wake me up to tell me that Eric had a problem. Taz woke Eric up a couple times, but it wasn't like it was before. And if we did nothing in that man's life other than stop the night terrors, we've accomplished a major thing. But there's so much more that's happened. He's back in society. He's working to become my 2IC on the Project Healing Water stuff. He's gotten his life back. And it's not just him. It's take a message for me. Thanks. It's 107 others that are exactly the same. And I'm going to wrap up and we're going to go to questions, but I'm going to tell you the final part about, you remember I said there was those two kids, age 7 and 12? Most people do not remember where they were on the 11th of November of any particular year, other than they were at a Remembrance Day ceremony. I shall never forget the 11th of November, 2016. We had a day, wasn't your typical Remembrance Day. It was cold, it was clear, the wind's snapping, the flags, the sun's out, and we can hear the parade coming down the road. And there's this tug on my sleeve. Grayson is 5 years old at this point. Grayson looks at me, says, "Medrick, can I ask you a question?" And I said to him, "Young man, you can always ask me a question. Never be afraid to ask." He says, "Medrick, would you be my grampy?" Boom! Pollen clouds, I'm full on in tears. And see, that wouldn't have happened if his dad hadn't got out of the house with his family to come to a Remembrance Day ceremony, because that wasn't happening before. And I'm very blessed now. I have the best gig in the entire world. Being an adopted grandpa, there is nothing that will rival it. And I now understand the special bonds between adopted children and adopted parents, because now that I'm the adoptee, it's special. And there are other stories yet to be written. And you people in Branch 564 and Branch in Manitoulin Island and all those other branches that are supporting Operation Service Dog, that is why I said thank you in the beginning. Because that is what you're making happen. We have got veterans from every single branch of the service. We have male and female, Army, Navy, Air Force, pretty much every MOC. Some of the MOCs are overrepresented in our sample. We have a lot of medics that are really struggling. Compassion fatigue and PTSD has taken them out. But that is what you're doing. And now, when somebody says, "What does the Legion do anyway?" you can look at them and say, "Well, have I got a story to tell you? Because our branch did this, along with our zone, our district, our command, and our country. And I cannot thank you enough for what you're doing." So ladies and gentlemen, I'm going to open it up to questions because I'm sure there are going to be a bunch. And before I do the questions, I have one other piece of formal business I got to do. There's a young lady, Mary.
Mary's outside.
Okay, can somebody grab Mary?
That's her wish.
Ah, okay. You realize that my wife is in the room, right? So just be careful what you say here. You know, earlier on in the discussion when I kept meeting all these women, he was like, what the hell? But the problem is, it's the spouses, as I said earlier, that are wearing this. They get to see it. And it's quite horrible. So when Mary comes in, there she is. Mary! Come alongside, young lady.
Trying to avoid all these things.
I know, but you can't avoid this one. So for those of you who want even more detail, I've actually written a book. The book is called Further Than Yesterday, That's All That Counts. And I will recount where the title comes from in a minute. But Mary, as my gift to you and the branch for helping us launch it, it says to Branch 564, thank you for hosting us an Op Service Dog. You were Possum. How far? FTY, Coos, and Ty. And Ty actually signs with her little paw print. So Mary, on behalf of Op Service Dog, Wounded Warriors Canada, and myself, thank you so much.
Well, thank you very much for prejudice. Thanks for having me here today.
Thank you. So people are going to probably wonder, how did you come up with a name Further Than Yesterday, That's All That Counts? Well, when I was training for that walk, I also suffer from rheumatoid arthritis, and there was one day that the pain was so bad, I couldn't go another step. And I walked to where I'd walked to the day before. And in my mind, I said if I could go one more step, just one more, then I knew I was going to be okay. And I took that step. And I went further than yesterday. And that's all that counts. Because the people that are struggling with PTSD, that are in their basements, battling addictions, marital breakdowns and whatnot, we have got to instill that hope in those people that there is a way out of this. Because if not, there's a very negative outcome. Okay? Tattooed inside my left wrist is the word Invictus. It's Latin for unconquered. But the second I is a semicolon. Do any of the people in this room know what a semicolon tattoo means? One. For the rest of you, if you see somebody that has a butterfly and the body is like a semicolon, or a word and there's a semicolon in it, it means that those people have battled serious mental health issues and most likely tried to take themselves out.